Hello and welcome to this demo video for the lead, quote, and project tracker. I've received a lot of the spreadsheets I do are for lead trackers or for quote trackers or for quote generators or for project trackers. And most of the time I go into more detail with regards to leads and the quotes and the projects. But this time what I've decided to do is do one that combines all three. So you can actually track leads going into quotes, quotes going into projects. But I don't track any one of them in great detail, especially the projects, because I don't go into all the, who needs to be where on what date and all that kind of stuff. I just keep like an overview of all of the leads into quotes, into projects. So I'll show you how it works. It's relatively simple to use, not so simple to make, but relatively simple to use. But if you want any of these in greater detail, like if you want the projects to go into more detail, or you aren't interested in the leads, or whatever the case might be, do get in touch because I can make a custom version focusing on any of these elements. But for the sake of this project, I've kind of gone for a high level view over all three as opposed to anything in great detail. So let's get started. Nothing to do on the intro and setup tab. There is a settings tab though. You can do the initial outcomes. You'll see what they are in a minute. What final status that means, your quote progress. So do they progress to quote? So not quoted wouldn't progress to quote, but quoted would. Because some people may have two different quotes to do and they may want to list both of them. So you might want to tick both of them. So these are ones that progress on to actually doing a quote. And then how many months to clear, I'll talk you through that as well. This is about clearing old data. You've got now more months to clear. You've got your inquiry method. Um, so did it come via email? Did it come via social media? Did it come via the website, DM, whatever the case, whatever options you want. These are the latest quotes, invoice numbers. I'll show you what those mean. Um, And all of these are the number of days to particular targets for them to flag up in yellow. I'll show you what those mean. These ones here is to tick off which of these columns you want to be compulsory so that it flags up in yellow. And this is about a partnership breakdown. I'll show you what that means. So all of these settings there may not make much sense now, but as we go through the spreadsheet, I'll refer to them and you'll be able to see what you can change here. So there are three red tabs. Inquiries and quotes, jobs and invoices, and they effectively go in that order. So you get the inquiries and quotes first. So this first section up to here, that's your initial inquiry. So you would fill in that information. There is some information off to the right, but that's potentially voluntary information, but you may have it as flagged up because the columns are wider. I put them off to the right because they take up too much space. You've got your job address, job overview, and the notes. So you can use those. If you don't want to use those, just mark them off as not compulsory, uncheck them in the settings. They won't flag up yellow and you can just ignore them. If you do want to use them, mark them as compulsory, and then it'll if they're not filled in, it'll have a required at the top when you scroll across and you'll be able to see that you need to fill it in. So you just start on the left. Date of inquiry. It's got a drop-down list. Today's date at the top. The previous, I think I've got 7-day period over here. You can just select which day it came in. So the date, company, person, email, and again, you can switch these off on the settings tab and then they won't turn yellow. I've switched the number off so the numbers don't turn yellow. If I were to actually go and put those numbers on and say, no, I do want the contact number, then when you come back to inquiries, you see they're all in yellow. Um, email number, estimated value. So if you think, well, this is going to be a £3,000 job, £2,000 job, whatever, you can put the estimated value in. If you don't know, leave it blank. And then the inquiry method. And these are all the drop-down list of what you've got in on the settings tab. When you get to that point, it then says it gives you time to actually acknowledge that quote. So you can set up again over here how many days from inquiry to acknowledge, and all of these days are working days. So if it comes in on the Friday, it'll only ask for it on the Monday, etc. I haven't put bank holidays in, but it's because it doesn't need to be 100% exact. It'll just flag up on the day that you're off and you'll see it the next day. But these are effectively working days. So after a day after this inquiry, this will flag up and go, you need to acknowledge it if they haven't already. When they acknowledge it, they can put the date in. That could be the same day. It doesn't matter. um, and not acknowledge it. And then once they've acknowledged it, it then gives them a certain number of days. Again, here from initial to last contact, 3 days. So you can see here, the last time I contacted them was on the 23rd, excuse me, of the 4th. It's now the 28th, and I haven't given an outcome yet. So this now flags up to go, you need to contact them again. And I go, okay, yes, I'll contact them again today. And then it sure goes away and it'll give me another 3 days until it flags up again. So this will keep alerting me and nagging me until I actually go and put in either one of these two. If I talk to the person says, listen, this is a long thing. I need to get all sorts of information, but I'll get you a quote by uh, the end of the month or whatever. Then if you put in a date to quote by in, it will overwrite this last contact and it won't flag up an alert until you get to that date. So I could even say, even now in April, I could actually say, well, I've told these guys I'm going to get them a quote by the 1st of July. And then this won't flag up again until the 1st of July. So this is almost like a delay until kind of column. When an outcome happens, I can then come and select the outcome. Now, I've put in a number here of ones because either we could decline and say, well, we're not going to quote because the job's not right, or we can say, well, we're going to quote, or we can say, well, they've declined. We could say to them, well, actually, we can do a quote, but it's going to be roughly 5 grand. And they've said, 5 grand, are you mad? We're not having that. So they've declined. Or they've just gone cold. You know what people are like, they just don't get back to you or whatever. You can name these. Now, this is what I said in the settings. What I've said is these are the names of the initial outcome. This is the final status. What the final status means is, I'll show you in a minute, but that each project is going to create an official status. And what this one does is it says, well, if the initial outcome was declined, then we're going to use the not quoted status to match that. So these ones here are set. These statuses are set. You can't adjust these. These are the final statuses. So you just assign each of these outcomes to one of the final statuses, which will then give each project a final status. So this one says it progresses to a quote. The other ones say that they don't. So let's test that out. If we say that we declined, then it comes to an end and it says not quoted because that was the final status from we declined, which is what I've said here. We declined, final status is not quoted, don't progress. Whereas if we went there and we said, well, actually, this is now to go for a quote, then it says, okay, well, what are the quote details? And now you say, all right, well, the quote number, and you tick here and it says, gives you quote number 12, which is the last quote because it's got up to quote number 11. And now it says the next one's quote number 12. In the settings, if we say, well, if you're starting a new spreadsheet and it's all clear and you're saying, well, our last quote was quote number 123, then you can come in here and say the last quote number was 123, which means now when you go to inquiries and quote, you'll see the next one, which is number 124. So you can override that last number in the settings if you want to. If you wanted to start at 1, then just start at 1, and it'll give you the next number in sequence. So we can say quote number 12, we're doing it today, and what's the value? So now when we actually doing the quote, it said the value is 2,800. It now says, all right, now the quote is done and it says quoted, and you've got a quote value. So you put the quote value in. Now what will happen is after a number of days, let's say we did the quote on the 1st of April, you'll see now this follow-up turns yellow because now after a certain number of days, again, in the settings, you can adjust those days. It'll then tell you, flag up in yellow to go, you need to actually chase up with this quote. And then again, you just fill in the last day you chased up and it'll refresh. And after another few days, it'll flag up again and it'll keep nagging you. If you've got an expected outcome, if the person says again, like this quote by, if someone comes and says, well, I'll get back to you by the end of 3 months' time, you can put a date in there in the future and it'll kind of hold that one. It won't alert you to it until you get to that date. When you get to the date and you get the outcome, you then just decide what the outcome is. Is it accepted, rejected, is it gone cold, in which case you haven't heard back from them, but you assume they're not going to take it, you mark it off, or other. I don't know what the other means. I've just put an other in there in case you have an other, then you can select other, but really it should probably be one of those three. So if we select accepted, then it says on what date did you get that outcome, and you just select the date that you got the outcome. Now, because I've selected accepted, Accepted then accepts the job. What you can do in settings is you can come here and you can go accepted accepts the job, rejected doesn't accept the job, gone cold doesn't accept the job, and other you can decide, because other might be something like accepted with conditions you may have as an other, or other might be something weird. In which case, if you say, well, I want the job to go through to a job, if I select other, then just check that. If you don't want the job to go through as a job, then leave it unchecked. So it's only really that one that you need to adjust there. So at the moment, I've said don't send through other. So because I've selected accepted, what happens now is when I go to the job tab, it says there's a new job and it says required and it gives me a yellow cell. So all I need to do now is just select that job and it'll tell me in the drop down, it'll give me the job that's been brought across. So what that effectively means is because it's been accepted as a job, when I come to the jobs and I select it, it now brings that job across and fills it in based on the data on the inquiries and quote tab. And now this is ready to go ahead as a job. I'll come over to this job tab in a minute. So let me just remove that for now. Go back to quotes. So now you've got the standard data at the end here, and this is now complete. There's nothing else to do on this sheet. You've now got to the end of that. It keeps the statuses here, which is where that job got up to, so that that can come up in reporting, which is useful. The only other thing you need to know on all three tabs, and it starts with this tab, is this remove column will slowly but surely place X's in these, because what I've said in the settings is I've said any accepted jobs, remove them 6 months. Now, this 6 months is actually 6 months after the job is finished. Rejected jobs, 3 months, 3 months after they're actually rejected. Gone cold, remove 5 months after they've gone cold. And others remove 4 months after they've been selected. So from this point of view, you can select how long you want all these jobs to be removed. And what that does, here you've got months to clear as well. So the initial outcomes, if the initial outcome is we decline, then do it 3 months. If the initial outcome is they decline, then clear it 5 months after. So you can select here with the initial outcome and here with the final outcome. If it has an initial outcome, it'll take these. If it's got a final outcome, it'll take those, and it'll take the longer of the two. So it'll adjust those accordingly. And what you need to do is then what will happen is each of these rows will get an X when they're ready to be removed. I think I gave an option, where was it? Number of removable entries to trigger an alert. I've put 0. So the first one that comes up will trigger an alert, but you can say, for example, put 10, 20, 30, which means you need to get 30 X's before it actually triggers you on the dashboard to say, please remove the excess jobs. So what will happen if you get a trigger after 10, 20, 30 jobs? You'll see the X's down here, but they'll all be scattered about potentially. They won't all be in a nice, neat row. So what you do, if that was X and that was X, for example, and you want to clear them, you select all the X's down to the bottom of the data, copy, come to the sorter, right-click, and paste values. Not normal paste. That'll paste all the locked cells and formatting, everything. You just want to paste values. You just want to paste the data into it. And when you paste values, you'll then see the X's in these column, in the sorter column. You can then sort by that column. So you can click that, sort A to Z, Z to A, bring all the X's together, probably Z to A to be fair, to bring all the X's together at the top. And then where you've got, so that when you might end up with a situation like that, for example, where the X's all together, then you just simply come across, right across here like that, under the red headers, right click, clear contents. You clear off all of that stuff. Then you can resort by inquiry date. And once you've done that, you've now removed the jobs on this sheet. These will all be gone by that stage. You then remove the jobs from this sheet. Then when you go to your jobs, you'll have the same situation over here. Any jobs that have been removed will have an X in the remove column, and you can copy and paste that into the sorter, sort them and clear them out. And then you can come to the invoice as well, which we'll get in a minute. On the right-hand side, they've also got the same thing. And you can come and clear out all the old jobs. So this allows you to decide which of these old ones you want to clear out, because you don't want to clear stuff out too soon. And that lets you keep using the spreadsheet, rolling it over and over and over and over again. Alternatively, You can just use up one until you get to the end of the year and copy the ones you want across to the next one and start a new one if you want to do it that way. But this way at least allows you to clear off the old jobs. Moving on to jobs. Once you've selected the job number, as we said before, you then do the same process that you've just done left to right across the spreadsheet, but for the jobs. Any cells that have got a green header will be locked. You can't actually edit those. They're formulated. Anything with a red header, you can actually edit and should, and especially if it gives you an alert at the top. So because this is a new signing, it now gives you this one due. This doesn't give you the bold yellow. I'll show you why on the dashboard in a minute, why that would make sense. It just uses a slightly duller yellow because it's not as urgent an alert. But what this does is it just says that there's one contract agreement that is due. So you need to send off a contract agreement. So when you send off the contract agreement, this is basically just a thing to sign. When you send that off, you can select it, and then it says signing, and then it'll give you a few days, and then it'll start to flag up for the client to return the contract agreement. This is just to remind you to chase them up, and then you can get hold of them. When they then come back, I'm just going to leave this one blank for now. When they come back to you, you can then sign there, and then it says that the job is in progress. Now, if the job changes, so at the moment it's expecting the job to be 4,830 because that's what we quoted. If when the job actually starts, you go, well, hold on, it's between quoting and starting the job's now changed to 5 grand. You can actually put an updated value in here, and it updates the value of the job, and now it's expecting them to be paying 5,000 as far as the invoice are concerned. If you've got an expected completion, so if you know, well, this job needs to be finished by such and such a date, put that date in there and it'll remind you when you get the date that you now should be done. But if you don't have an expected date, just leave it blank. It'll just continue with in progress until you finish. Then you go through the jobs. I'll come to invoicing because obviously you're going to go through invoicing with the jobs. But when you actually finish the job, then you just put in the date with the actual completion. So if we say 28th of April was the actual completion, then it says what were the material costs and what were the staff costs. And you can just put those in. Were there any extra charges? These were extra charges that you charged the client. So if you go, well, we billed them an extra 200 quid, you can put that in there. It'll then adjust for that extra amount of money. And then the materials cost and the staff cost. So if we said, for example, staff costs was 1,000 and material costs were 500, then what it does is it actually will give you the breakdown. You scroll to the right, total cost. That one's not done yet. This total cost, final profit, how much for partner one, how much for partner two, because it just splits it 50-50. You can adjust the partners. I'll show you that in the settings in a minute. But yeah, that will give you the information that you need as far as the job costing is concerned. This still says that there's pounds owing. The reason why it says that there's pounds owing is because it says you have invoiced none, you've got been paid none, you've got to still invoice 5 grand, and you still have to pay, and they still have to pay 5 grand. This will take us across to the invoicing job, which is very similar. When you want to create an invoice, you select the next invoice in sequence. Again, you can go into settings and adjust the starting invoice number if you want to, but the next invoice number is 9. What's the date? This date. Select the quote number. So which quote is this relevant for? So if we go to the jobs and we see what it's this one, it's number 8. I want to invoice 5,000. So then you go invoice number 8, job number 8. What's the invoice value? 5,000. Now the invoice is prepared, not sent, it's prepared. When you actually issue it, you can come and select the issue date, and then you can put in the date expected to pay if you want to. Otherwise, if you look at the settings, I think I put a contract to sign, invoice delay in sending prepared to issues. No, there's no invoice date. You can put that in. Yeah, that was just you can put in an expected date to be able to pay it, and it'll flag up to ask you. When the invoice is paid, the date paid, you can put the date in. So if I said, well, it was paid, then it says what value was paid, and it gives me the value of the invoice. Now, if they paid, for example, 4,900, I can put in 4,900, and it's going to tell me this invoice was paid short. If they pay in 5,100, pay it over, because you know what it's like. They could make a mistake and there could be issues, and you want to be able to track that. But 9 times out of 10, hopefully they'll pay the correct amount. You select it. If I did put in 4,800, for example, then it gives me a page short. And you can then put in a reason for the value difference. If you need to do that, you can put that in and say this was the reason um, for the invoice being paid short. You've also got some notes there. Here you can see the address and job overview that came from the other sheet. So that allows you to then track the invoices. Because this invoice has now been paid in full, if I go back to the jobs, you can see now this job is now completed because the invoices have all been invoiced, all been paid. So it tracks what value of the jobs are outstanding. If I went to the invoice and said, well, this hasn't been paid yet, so this is still issued. If I go back to the jobs, it says 5,000 has been issued, but nothing's been paid. So they still have to pay 5 grand and it still says pounds owing. So you can see by the invoice, it actually then updates the job card. When that job is done, it now says completed. And because I've put all this information in, it gives me the breakdown. Now, the partners, there are two elements to the partners. First of all, you can name the partner. So if partner one's name is John, for example, you can actually go and put in John. I've only put up to 2 partners. When you go back to the jobs again, you'll see it says John. So you can put in the partners. Then there are costs and paid by. So what costs mean is that if one of the partner, for example, did some work on the project, therefore needs to be paid, and his payment needs his cost of his work needs to be added to the job total, then that would be the cost column. So, for example, I've said in this case, partner one does work. Partner two isn't going to be doing work on jobs, so I've left that off so that it grays out the column. And when it says paid in, what this means is partner two may go and pay someone from their own funds, which means that it needs to be taken into account with a profit. And paid in, this guy, partner one won't do it, but partner two might. And I said the profits split is 50-50. So this might be 50, 70-30, whatever the case might be. So when you actually go to the jobs, what this means is partner one, days cost, partner two, there's no cost, paid in by partner one, partner two. So you can have a play around with that and see how that affects the final profit and how it affects the breakdown of who gets what based on what they pay in. The last one is the invoice tab. The invoice tab, again, very similar. I've spoken about the invoice tab. Yeah, we've gone through the invoice tab. You know how the invoice tab works. We know how the job tab works. You know how the inquiry tab works. The last 2 tabs are the 2 green ones. There's first of all a report, which this is a filter down the left-hand side. You can select. It gives you a breakdown basically of all the statuses of the job, the statuses of the inquiries and quotes, and the statuses of the jobs. And you can select which ones you want to see. And then you can, at the bottom here, select the 12-month period. So the starting month and the starting year to get the 12-month period you want to see. And then you can see what this left-hand side here is inquiries and quotes, and these are jobs. You can first of all see the count, the by count of how many, and then you can see the value. So for example, here in January, I can see here that there are 2 in the gray. So there are 2 jobs in January that have gone cold. And here I can see the value of the jobs that have gone cold. There I can see the value of the rejected. Here I can see the value of the green, which is accepted, etc. And it's the same by the jobs. So it's a number of inquiries and quotes, number of jobs, and the value of inquiry quotes and value of jobs by status. So if I say, well, I just want to see accepted jobs, then you can see, you just see the accepted jobs on the graph. Or I can see, I just want to see accepted and potentially quoted. Then you can see accepted and quoted on the job. So you can decide which ones you want to see. If you leave them all blank, it'll tick the all and it'll do all of them. So that's the dynamic report. The dashboard's fixed. This dashboard, it shows you inquiries and quotes, breakdown by count, value, percentage, jobs, and invoices. And it gives you all the breakdowns by the different status, values, and the number and the percentage of the value, and the graphs underneath. This is fixed. This is for everything. So that kind of stays as it is, but you can see those numbers at a glance as to what you're dealing with. And then at the bottom here, you can see that these will flag up different alerts. So it says here one contract to be sent. So then you go, okay, yeah, when you go to jobs, you can see there's the one contract that needs to be sent. So it sent an alert to the dashboard. If we went to inquiries, for example, let's break something here so that it shows what I'm talking about. In fact, if we go to the invoices, we'll see it easier. If we remove these, clear that, and clear that, and clear that, for example, this is a yellow to say required, and it wants a value because it's incomplete. When you go to the dashboard, it says that there's one yellow alert. So you can go to the invoices and complete this data. If you put in, for example, to be confirmed, it goes, that's text, not a value. You can't have that. It says it's valid. If you go to the dashboard, it says one red alert, which you need to now go and sort out and put a value in. So yeah, I hope that that makes sense. It's quite a long demo video because there's a lot to go through here today. But as I said, this is an overview of the whole thing. It follows the whole process, helps you keep track of your jobs, and it's great when you need it. If you're thinking this is marvelous, but you want to go into more detail, then there's certain elements you don't need more detail than other elements. Do let me know because these are the kind of custom spreadsheets I create all the time. So I'm more than happy to chat to you about that. But if this does give you a really good overview of the projects that you want to go from inquiry through to project completion, just to be able to monitor what you've got in your books at one point and to help you track things. If this does the job for you, then that's marvelous. And yeah, I do wish you all the best with that. Thank you very much and goodbye.